My name is Cassandra Maddox. I investigate cases that were closed without answers. Cases where the official explanation fails quietly, without headlines, without outrage, because the alternative is worse. Flight 217 is one of those cases. On paper, it was a successful commercial flight. It departed on time. It landed intact. There were no injuries reported, but 4 passengers who boarded that aircraft never arrived at their destination. They did not trigger alarms. They did not appear in emergency records. They did not re-enter the world in any verifiable way. What follows is not theory. It is a reconstruction based on flight data, internal airline documentation, and materials never released to the public. Flight 217 was not considered high risk. It was a short-haul regional flight operating under routine parameters. No weather advisories were issued. No mechanical warnings were present before departure. The aircraft passed inspection without exception. Fuel load was standard. Cabin pressure systems were functioning within tolerance. All emergency exits were sealed. Boarding began normally. According to the manifest, 86 passengers were scanned onto the aircraft. 4 of those passengers boarded together. They were seated in the same row, 12A, 12B, 12C, and 12D. Their identities were verified at check-in, and boarding passes were scanned without error. At no point before departure did Flight 217 register an anomaly. That detail matters, because nothing about this flight suggested it would ever need to be remembered. The 4 passengers assigned to row 12 were research scientists. They were traveling to an international medical conference scheduled to begin the following morning. According to conference records, they were scheduled to present preliminary findings related to a possible treatment pathway for a rare form of blood cancer. Their work had not yet been published. The 4 were not colleagues in the conventional sense. They worked at different institutions. They did not share an employer. They had not previously published together. What linked them was data. Each had independently reached the same conclusion through separate research tracks. The conference was the first time those findings were to be discussed in the same room. Flight records confirmed that all 4 passengers were seated in row 12. They were not upgraded. They did not request proximity seating. The arrangement was generated automatically by the airline system. At cruising altitude, the aircraft experienced a brief electrical issue. Flight data indicates a momentary loss of cabin lighting. The event lasted approximately 6 minutes. Emergency systems did not engage. Backup power did not activate. According to the cockpit log, the issue resolved on its own. When cabin lighting returned, nothing appeared out of place. Passengers remained seated. Carry-on items were undisturbed. No alarms were triggered. But row 12 no longer contained 4 people. Seat belts remained fastened. No passenger reported seeing anyone leave those seats. No movement was detected in the aisle. The electrical interruption was the only recorded irregularity during the flight. It is also the last moment at which the 4 scientists can be confirmed to have existed inside the aircraft. The aircraft landed on schedule. There was no emergency response waiting at the gate. No medical teams, no security presence. Nothing in the flight data suggested that anything had gone wrong. The first indication came during the standard post-flight cabin check. A flight attendant reported that row 12 was empty. At first, this was treated as an accounting error. Passengers move. Passengers change seats. Passengers miss connections. This happens. The manifest listed 86 passengers. Only 82 exited the aircraft. The count was performed again and again. The number did not change. The cabin was searched in full. Restrooms were checked. Galleys were checked. Overhead bins were opened. Personal belongings were found above row 12. 4 carry-on bags, 4 coats. None were claimed. No passengers identified them as their own. The flight crew reviewed their own statements. All confirmed that row 12 had been occupied after takeoff. No one recalled seeing the 4 passengers stand up during the flight. No one recalled them moving toward the exits after landing. Airport security reviewed gate footage. 82 passengers entered the terminal. No one exited through unauthorized areas. No one bypassed screening. No one was escorted out separately. There was no record of 4 individuals leaving the secured area. Witness interviews were conducted within 12 hours of landing. All 82 remaining passengers were questioned individually. Most accounts initially appeared unremarkable. Several passengers reported that during the electrical outage, they remained seated and waited for instructions. No announcements were made. No instructions were given. A subset of passengers reported hearing movement during the outage. Not running, not shouting. Quiet movement. Multiple witnesses described the sound of seatbelts shifting, consistent with people adjusting in their seats or standing briefly and sitting back down. One witness described the sound of fabric brushing against armrests. Another reported hearing footsteps in the aisle that stopped abruptly. No one reported seeing anything. 2 passengers seated near row 12 independently reported brief scuffling sounds. They did not describe a struggle. They described the sound of bodies repositioning in close quarters, the kind of noise produced when people are trying to move without drawing attention. Both witnesses stated the sounds lasted less than a minute. Both assumed it was turbulence-related. There was no turbulence recorded. Several passengers reported hearing voices, but were unable to identify words. They described low-volume speech, the kind used when people believe they are being overheard. One witness stated he heard what he believed to be a whispered argument. Another said the tone suggested urgency, but not panic. When asked if anyone saw the 4 scientists leave their seats, every witness answered no. When asked if anyone heard activity in row 12, the answers became less consistent. Some said no. Others said they might have, but could not be certain when. Several admitted that during the outage they avoided turning their heads, assuming the lights would return quickly. No witness reported screams. No witness reported a physical altercation. No one pressed the call button. No one stood up to intervene. Investigators noted this as unusual, not because nothing happened, but because something appears to have happened quietly. The families of the 4 scientists were notified within 24 hours of the flight's arrival. The notification did not include an explanation. They were told that their relatives had been aboard Flight 217 and that an irregularity had occurred. No further details were provided at that time. Each family was interviewed separately. The interviews followed the same format. Investigators asked about recent behavior, emotional state, and any indication that their relatives intended not to complete the flight. None of the families reported anything unusual. All 4 individuals had packed for a short stay. Conference materials were prepared. Return flights had been booked. One family provided text messages sent less than an hour before departure. The messages discussed hotel check-in and presentation timing. Nothing suggested distress. 2 family members reported that their relatives had spoken about the upcoming conference with cautious optimism. They described the work as promising, but incomplete. There was no indication of secrecy beyond standard professional discretion. No one expressed fear. None of the families reported withdrawal from daily routines, unusual financial activity, emotional detachment, or language suggesting finality. There were no farewell messages. One family provided access to a laptop used by the scientist prior to the flight. The most recent document open was a draft presentation. The file had been altered after departure. The cursor remained positioned at the end of an unfinished sentence. All four families asked the same question during their interviews. They did not ask what had happened. They asked when their relatives would be arriving. Investigators did not answer. There was no behavioral evidence suggesting the four scientists anticipated harm. There was no evidence of mental health crisis. There was no indication that any of them believed they were in danger. The families were informed that the investigation would continue. They were not given a timeline. They were not given a classification. They were told only that the case was under review. 18 months later, the final report concluded with the classification inconclusive. No cause was identified, no fault assigned. The four passengers were not declared deceased. They were not listed as missing in the conventional sense. Their case status remains undefined. According to official records, they boarded Flight 217 and were never recorded as disembarking. There is no entry that documents their removal from the aircraft. The investigation was formally closed after 18 months. No further action was recommended. The incident was archived under aviation anomalies. In the months that followed, after news of the incident circulated, seats 12A, 12B, 12C, and 12D were never selected again. Passengers avoided them. On multiple flights, the cabin departed with those four seats empty. To this day, they are still counted. And yet, according to passenger records, they are almost never occupied. Some investigations end with answers. Others end with silence that looks like closure. This case belongs to the second category, because every system involved agrees on one thing. Those four passengers were there, and then they weren't. If you're still here, you're one of the curious ones. Stick around. The next mystery's already waiting.